What's going on, everybody? Really fun week this past week at the Mexico Open. We're going to jump into some Cognizant Classic stuff. We're going to talk about Taylor Gooch's ridiculous comments, Anthony Kim's return. Lots of good stuff here on Pro V Pro. How you doing, Justin?
Good, man. I think that you hit on the main thing that is the most fun for me to talk about, and that's how Live Golf has won again. So it's just amazing to me how the PGA Tour can continue to drop the ball, and now you're going to get a week where everybody turned off Pebble to watch Live, and because they didn't play Pebble, and now Anthony Kim's return. Is there more hype about this return than Tiger Woods playing last week?
No. And
you don't think so?
I think there's definitely not. I think you and I are going to disagree a bunch on Anthony Kim. Personally, I couldn't be less interested. I don't think he's going to be the same guy. That also might be like an age thing, right? Like his last win was in 2010. I don't know exactly how old I was at that time, but I know that golf wasn't like the main love of my life at that time. So I was a little bit less interested. I don't think I quite get the level of hype that it was at, but I also think just like, what are the chances he's anywhere near as good now as he was then?
I think it goes further than that. You're right. I think the age gap here might matter a little bit more than I give credit to, just because you got to think when he was a rising star, I was in the middle of my professional career, right? So I was dead center in my career. He's tied to Dallas, so he's local. There was a time where people were like, all right, this is the guy that's going to compete with Tiger. Like, that's how he was thought of amongst a lot of people, especially locally here, but even nationally. And then he did have I saw something, his last 10 or 12 starts, I think he only made like 2 cuts and just played really poorly. I just think the hype of it and to the pure eyes of what you're going to get by them signing him is really cool.
It's going to be really interesting to see the ratings. I don't know how much of a boost this will give Liv. So here's one thing I'll say about this. I can't remember who tweeted it, but I saw that when Kim won his last event on tour, it jumped him to 14th in the world. 14th in the world now, like that's Keegan Bradley, Colin Morikawa, Brian Harman is 10th in the world. That's the level of player that he was when he won for the last time. That just doesn't like move the needle a ton for me. I feel like the myth of Anthony Kim grew to something that far surpassed the actual player.
Yeah, and I don't disagree. Everybody, because he just disappeared, right? And everybody's just like, where'd he go? And everybody kind of knew that he liked to go out and have a good time and that whole scene. I think that the electricity that came around him was very unique of just his ability to the entertainment value of watching him, right?
Yeah.
It's not the entertainment value of watching Patrick Cantlay. We talked about that last week. And like Patrick Cantlay walks to the scores table and you've got 300 kids trying to get autographs and he doesn't even give one a high five. He just walks stoically past them. Whereas, Anthony Kim was very, very electric. And I honestly, I don't think that he would be out there playing if he didn't think he would compete, right? I think he likes the mystique of not knowing what happened.
Yeah.
I think there's just something, you can't take that competitive drive out of him. And I'll be interested to, let's say he plays really good, somebody like you who's a little bit behind, maybe a generation for when he was good. Are you going to be like, all right, maybe I'm going to watch Saturday or Sunday just to see what it's all about?
Yeah, I think it's going to depend a lot on how Kim plays, right? Like if after round 1 he's tied for the lead, the ratings are certainly going to explode for the next round or two. If he shoots 5 over and it's like, oh, I guess he's not very good, no one's going to tune in for the weekend to watch him when he's 10 over and 15 shots behind the lead or whatever. So it's going to be interesting to see. I do agree with that. I think another point here is it's funny that you mentioned Cantlay. Out of pure coincidence, I looked this up prior to the show just because I was just kind of guessing. I was trying to find somebody who had a similar career peak in the 50-round rolling average that Data Golf has. Anthony Kim's highest was 2.2 strokes gained over 50 round sample. Patrick Cantlay has reached a peak of 2.7. So again, we're not talking about like the hype back then. I think you're right. I think people marketed Anthony Kim as the guy who could end up, giving Tiger a run for his money. My point is Anthony Kim was never actually the guy who was going to do that. He was just built up as that. I think the media was starved for someone to be a competitor to Tiger, and Kim provided that in part because he had a flash to him that, and a swagger that was just really rare for golfers. But from a pure talent perspective, I don't think he was ever anywhere close to that.
Yeah, and you got to once again, and maybe this is why I'm so much more excited about it than you are, is that there really wasn't anybody flashy back then. Like there wasn't a Ricky Fowler wearing bright orange and stuff like that. You just didn't have the same. It was still a way more conservative game, for lack of a better way to put it. And also, like, I would argue back then, the reason everybody was looking for somebody to compete with Tiger is the depth was not near what the depth is today. I think that a lot of people miss out on that point, that the depth of PGA Tour fields now is far greater than what they were 15 years ago.
I agree, which is why it's even less impressive to me that he reached 14th when he got that last win. I think Fowler, though, is just a perfect comparison, because it's about the flash more than the talent, right? Like, I think there was a belief that Fowler could become the superstar, but I also think there's a pretty high chance that belief was overestimated, because people love the flash, and it was more like, I hope he becomes this player, and not, I think he has a good chance to. And I think that's probably exactly what we saw with Anthony Kim as well. That being said, if Fowler had disappeared for 15 years and then showed back up to play, the buzz would be there. So I understand the buzz. I'm just personally not that interested in it myself.
Yeah, which I think that, the way that I think that's what makes both of us unique, right? Is we kind of look at this in a different way, and we played it at a different time in our lives, and things are far different. I just think, it's, the old saying, curiosity kills the cat. I think that's kind of what this is for everybody. Everybody's so curious that if Liv just wants to get eyes, wants to get viewership, I think this is a great way to do it. I mean, they've had a couple of opportunities now where people are just going to, and it's not so much, I don't think, Anthony Kim, that they're going to tune in to see Anthony Kim, but they're going to feel the whole Liv vibe by watching Anthony Kim. So I think it's just a good opportunity for them to showcase what they have.
Do you have a prediction for the ratings boost that Kim will provide? Like, if you look at this week's ratings versus last week's ratings, are you thinking 100% boost? Are you thinking 50%, 300%? Like, what's your prediction here?
I don't keep up with that as much as maybe some of others. I couldn't even tell you like the percentage of any of it. I just, from all of my friends, right, that I play golf with around here, similar in age, all been around golf for a while. I know a lot of people are planning on watching that generally have never, I've talked to at least 20 people that have never watched Live once, and they're going to watch. So is that just the Texas, my age Texas thing, or is that going to translate to people all over? I mean, you can look down Twitter and see there's still some buzz about it.
I feel like you and I can come up with a good bet for this, like on the ratings itself. I don't know. Maybe I'm in a bubble because I'm just young enough that like all my friends were a little too early for the Anthony Kim kind of madness. Maybe you're in a bubble because you're like the exact age group, the exact demographic that you were right in it, fully immersed in it during the Anthony Kim stuff. So I don't know. It'll probably end up somewhere in between what I think and what you think. I would guess would be the safest assumption, right? It'll be a little bit more hype than you're giving it credit for, but probably a lot less hype than what I'm giving it credit for. So on February 6th, I just found a report from golf.com. Live Golf earned its highest TV rating yet with 432,000 viewers. So
is that the Pebble Day?
I think that was February 6th. When was Pebble?
Where they canceled Sunday at Pebble, right?
Yeah, I think that was Pebble. I can't remember if it was that early. I know Pebble was the first week of February. I just don't remember if it was that early. I feel like it had to be. So So where would your guess be relative to that? You can set the line for us, and then we'll do an over under bet.
I would be interested to see how that number translated to last week. Obviously that was special circumstances as well, that high number. So I would expect it to be on par with that number. I think that the same boost that they got from Pebble not playing, I think they're going to get that exact same boost from Anthony Kim.
That's fair. Okay, so last Saturday they got 297,000 viewers on the CW. Or that was on February 16th, that report. So in Las Vegas, which was the week of the WM Open, not the Pebble. So 300,000 viewers. Where do they go from there? Should we make the line 500,000 viewers?
I honestly, what'd you say the Sunday at Pebble was how many viewers?
400,000, 432,000. And then 300,000 for Las Vegas.
So I think it'll go right. I think right back to that Pebble line would be a very fair line, whatever that 430,000. I think that the you're still going to get people. The problem is also like this week's tour event is a very watchable tour event as well, in my opinion. Mm-hmm. Like I would argue this is one of the best courses they've played so far, the most fun to watch, the most. So I don't know, like. I would be very surprised if they don't get back to the Pebble number, especially if Anthony Kim's in contention on Sunday. I think it blows it out of the water.
So I agree with you there. I think that if the Anthony Kim boost is only equivalent to the boost of there's no PGA Tour event going on that day, then Liv will be extremely disappointed. I think they're hoping for like at least double that 300,000 number. I think they're hoping for 750,000, something like that, eventually getting to 1 million with Anthony Kim. I think if all they do is get back to that Pebble number, it will be a complete failure for them.
Well, I think the expectation of week one getting to that Pebble number is pretty fair. I think what they're betting on is that if Anthony Kim does return to any form and is all of a sudden in contention, you're going to get to that 1 million really fast.
Fair. The counterpoint there is this might be the only chance. Because if Anthony Kim isn't that good anymore, which, again, we have no idea how good he is. Maybe he's been working on his game really, really hard for a while now and is actually better than he was previously. I kind of feel like the more likely answer is that he's not anywhere near as good as he used to be. If he comes out, gets close to last place in the first event, how many people are tuning in the next week? Now, all of a sudden, if he strings together 3 or 4 events where he's never even close to contention, nobody's tuning in for Anthony Kim anymore. The story's completely dead.
Unless he gets going,
back might be the only chance to really capitalize on the hype.
Yeah, and I think they're just kind of gambling that even if it takes him a few weeks to find it, like 4, 5, 6 tournaments down the road, once he gets his feet underneath him, maybe he does return to form. And I think I think that his name is big enough that that's enough draw to be like, all right, he's figured it out. Now I'm going to go back and watch. I think you might find a few down weeks. I just think that the gamble that Liv has made is the right one if they're really going to try to grow. I mean, I saw a ton of talk about Hideki. Surely that doesn't really happen, I don't think.
I'd be surprised. In part because I feel like they've already offered him everything they can offer.
Yeah. And it's just, I don't know. I mean, obviously, I think we're pretty safe to say Rory isn't going, even though I saw all the talks this week about that. I mean, boy, could you imagine the backlash Rory would get if he went to Liv?
Right. It would sink him. He would have to be at the point where he just is so sick of being a part of like the public eye that he almost doesn't care what people think of him anymore, and he wants to go to Liv just to disappear from it all. But I'd be shocked. I'd be completely shocked.
Yeah, no doubt. All right, I'm off my soapbox of what I'm excited about this week and the generational gap that we have. So it's pretty good. Let's go back and talk about the Mexico Open and
Well, real quick, instead I want to give you a chance to now take the opposite side of a live discussion, and we can collectively make fun of Taylor Gooch and his comments about Rory. I wish that I hadn't told you the quote before we started, because your initial reaction was just so perfect. So backstage, Justin asked me, I put in the show sheet, Gooch is a dumbass was my exact quote in the show sheet. We get on camera behind stage, and Justin asked me, what did Gooch say? So I said, he said that if Rory wins the career Grand Slam this year, that it will come with an asterisk. And Justin just sat back and just shook his head. That was all he could do. So why don't you take it from there? What are your thoughts on this quote?
Well, I mean, let's be honest. You're still getting the best players from Liv. It's not like all of Liv isn't playing. Like, maybe that comment, if no Brooks, no Rahm, no DJ, like, I mean, like after that, but no Cam Smith, okay, so there's your 4, right? I'm sure there's somebody I'm leaving out, but it's not like you have nobody. You still have their best players. If Rahm wasn't playing, they're like, oh yeah, Rahm, you're out. Like, Koepka, you're out. Like, I would be like, maybe, you didn't have to play against the best player in the world, so or one of the best players in the world. So you'd have to definitely be like, hey, this is a weird time. But that's not the case. It's just a dumb comment. He's not worried about playing against Taylor Gooch. Like, he's just not. Like, if Rory has his A game and Taylor Gooch has his A game, Rory demolishes him. It's not like, it's not even I don't know. It's just a terrible comment. It's just such a far reach.
Collectively, there's like half of a percentage point of win equity missing, and the guys that are replacing it are probably close to that. It's almost nothing. I'm in complete agreement there. The other thing is, I don't understand why these guys can't get it through their head that, like, at this point, you could have been annoyed with the original ruling from the official World Golf Ranking that they weren't going to count. At this point, you should be mad at the people running your own tour, your own league. They don't even call it a tour. Tell them to make the necessary changes to qualify for official World Golf Rankings points. Don't continue to be mad at the official World Golf Rankings. It's such an easy solution, and they just won't do it.
I would be interested if there's talks behind closed doors where they literally, like, we can think whatever we want, but I wonder if there's literally a spot where they were like, just go to 4 rounds and we'll give you World Golf Ranking points. That's all you have to do.
Yeah. I'm not sure what the qualifications exactly are, but I know official World Golf Rankings came out and said, look, we have these established, like, requisite, things that you have to meet to qualify for official World Golf Rankings points. You don't meet them. And Liv was just like, they were just mad. Instead of saying, okay, we'll implement these changes to meet them, will you give us points then? They just decided to do nothing.
And I mean, let's be honest, like, the World Golf Ranking point system isn't exactly the best in the world anyway. Like, it has plenty of flaws in itself. So I kind of understand the Liv's like their fight on that, because why don't they try to, it's just like the PGA Tour. Like, why do you just continue to fall further and further behind instead of trying to address some of the flaws that you have internally, which doesn't mean it's almost a pride factor. It's almost like they're going to, like, let's make Liv come over to our side and then we'll change things to make it more reasonable.
Yeah, I agree with that. But I also think, like, it's a completely different discussion. The flaws of the official World Golf Rankings do exist. It's a worthy conversation to have. But anyone from the Liv camp who's trying to make that argument is not making that argument genuinely. They are just trying to come up with a different reason to push their own agenda.
Yeah, and that's what I'm saying. Like, there's definitely things to handle. It's just they're not going to get it done their way with the way that they're going. So, yeah, they're barking up the wrong tree at this point. It is what it is. And did you?
My final point on this is Brooks Koepka also has the chance to complete the career Grand Slam this year. He needs to win both the Masters and the Open. But if he were to do that, you think Taylor Gooch is, being interviewed afterwards, asked about Brooks Koepka, and he says, oh, it's great that he did it, but it comes with an asterisk because I wasn't there.
Yeah. Come on.
It's just
so ridiculous. and it doesn't even make sense. Like nobody cares that you say like, what are you trying to prove? Not you're going to get. If John Rahm said it, I guarantee you more people would listen. Wouldn't make it right, but more people would listen to you.
Yeah, Gooch, I think, is leading the league in just absolutely moronic comments to the media. Maybe we shouldn't be surprised by it at this point, but it's still funny to me.
And it's not going to change. At least we got that going for us. We'll have something to talk about all the time. So
very true. All right, let's recap the Mexico Open. It was a really, really fun one for myself, for a lot of us here at FTN. What did you think of Jake Knapp's win?
Ball striking tee to green, especially the first couple rounds, is, I mean, as close to legendary as you could get given his position. And I wanted to point out something. Did you notice how much harder that golf course played in the morning than it did in the afternoon? And all the really bad starts?
Sometimes. Especially like the very first few tee times.
Yes.
But on Friday, the afternoon played at least a full stroke tougher. On Saturday, the late tee times were a little bit tougher. But there was like definitely this case that on holes like 1 through 3, on 10 through 12, the very first few guys out there were getting annihilated by the course. I'm guessing that it was about due. I don't know what your thoughts were there.
I mean, it's just, the greens were still a little bit bouncy and firm, and the ball is kind of skiddy with all the water on it. You got the marine layer, and then you hit it in the rough, and you got wet rough. So you get softer fairways, firmer greens because of the skid factor, and then the rough is going to be, a lot more difficult because you could get water flyers or you can get them to come out dead. It's just and even middle of the fairway, anybody that's never played an early morning round on, in a place like that, you can get water on the fairways and your ball just, you'll literally get a flyer from the dead center of the fairway. I think it was just a factor of all of that. And then maybe just a little bit chillier in the morning. And once it dried out and warmed up, I know Friday was a little bit different because the wind picked up, right? So that made it a little bit more difficult. But I think that if you would have made all things equal, the late tee times would have been much easier than the early tee times.
It's possible. I wonder how much temperature had to do with that as well. Like the mornings, they weren't cold, but they started somewhat cool, and then by the afternoon, it was really warm and the ball was flying like crazy.
Yeah,
we saw some big drives late in those days. I remember Knapp hitting one 378 on a par 5, something like that on 12. So I think that possibly had a lot to do with it too. The other thing that I noticed was that the wind wasn't just picking up in the afternoons, but some of the days it was completely reversing direction too. So wind direction might have played a role in that as well.
Yeah. And like I said, I was just, you don't see it very, everybody thinks early morning tee times are way easier. And I just strongly disagree anyway from my playing days. And that felt like this week was a great point of all of that. I mean, when I was playing, if I let's say I was first off, a lot of times here we were first off at 7:30, because we have so many players in the field. I mean, I would get up at 4:30 or 5, right? It's not, I mean, my body is well going by the time that tee time gets here.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not an issue. Most of these guys are up and go to the gym and do some kind of stretching super early. So it's not about that. It's just pure the conditions of how much more difficult it can be in the morning.
Yeah, I agree there. I think another point that I want to make on Jake Knapp is that coming into this week at the Farmers Insurance and the WM Phoenix Open, he gained strokes in every category: approach, around the green, and putting. Like the guy is known for his speed off the tee, deservingly so. It's mesmerizing to watch when it looks like he's swinging in slow motion and producing 192 mile per hour ball speed. It's just ridiculous. But the guy has a really, really complete all-around game. That's why I used him this past week on DraftKings, and it's why I might use him again this week. But more than anything else, he's somebody that I really expect to kind of take off and kind of enter, the top 20 in the world conversation, top 10 in the world conversation. I don't think was out of reach this year. You don't see this type of complete player. And I also like the fact that he's now done it on an easy course. Finished third at Torrey Pines, so we know that he can get it done on really difficult courses. Might be someone to pay attention to come major season.
Yeah, I mean, so not to beat a dead horse, but we talk about off the tee so much, and he checks all of those boxes, right? So the fact that he's good everywhere else just makes his upside that much better. But he, when you have the whole field basically lapped off the tee, it makes it a lot easier to see the upside in somebody. Mm-hmm. There was a point there I thought maybe the wheels were going to come off. Maki got within one, I think. And
he even took the lead.
Yeah, and it just looked like it was done, right? And then he gathered himself but that dude can make a birdie on every hole. I mean, it's just so impressive.
Yeah, completely. I did a lineup review, both a video and an article of my $10,000 win on DraftKings. Obviously, that was a very fun week, a very fun sweat. Came down, by the way, to I needed McIntyre to birdie the last and needed Chan Kim playing alongside of McIntyre to not birdie the last, and got exactly that result. Somewhat rare in PGA DFS that you need something that specific and actually get it. Like I had sweats in the first week of February and the second week of February at Pebble and then the WM Open. I needed something similar down the stretch and got the complete opposite of what I needed. So finished 4th and 6th in those weeks. It's nice to finally get into that winner's circle again this year.
And people don't understand how hard it is to win that contest. Mm-hmm. Like, I mean, there's so much that has to go right. And then, I mean, you have to do everything right. And then you have to get lucky on top of that, right? I mean, that's just the way it is. You're just trying to give yourself the biggest edge. To win that contest is so impressive. And not just that, but to be in contention, that many times. It's always fun to be in contention, but then to close the deal, I mean, as many times as I've been close, I've only won one time. It was just happened to be the $50,000 contest and not the $10,000, but Beautiful. It's just pure luck and everything you need. You're always going to need something down the stretch. I'm glad you brought up McIntyre because I really think he plays well again this week.
We're going to talk about him for sure, at least in the later section. Yeah. But yeah, I think it's a really good point you make. And I also say, like, I don't want to spend too much time on the DFS strategy or talking about the wins. Again, like did a video, did an article for it. Go check those out if you want the full scoop and the full thoughts of how I build lineups, why I think the new GPP scores that we have are so impactful, so powerful, why they have led to so much success. But the one thing that I will say is you mentioned how difficult it is to win the contests. I agree 1,000%. And because of how much I agree, my overall philosophy is I want to try to win in weeks where the field as a whole does poorly. Like in my article, I use the terminology. I think it's easier to make a great lineup in a week that most lineups stink than it is to make the perfect lineup in a week that all lineups are good, which means more often than not, you're fading all the chalk and you're hoping that they underwhelm. 3 of the 7 most popular plays this past week missed the cut. Only one of them, Steven Yeager, did anything like that you actually would really want in a lineup. I think Finau was the second best of them, and he was like 11th or something like that. So those are the types of weeks that I think it's a lot easier to win. Very similar story at Pebble, by the way. I think Max Homa was the most popular. There were like 3 or 4 guys who were 30% plus that week. None of them were in the top 10. Those are the types of weeks that I'm going to succeed in. And again, I just think it's a hell of a lot easier to build a quality lineup in a week when most stink than it is to find that perfect lineup when everyone else is doing well.
So I got a question for you then, and I know it's just kind of a lead into this week, and we can kind of go back if we need to. But when you have a guy like Rory this week that is so much better than the field, I'm sure he's projecting a ton percentage-wise as far as ownership. Do you have when somebody projects this much better, do you have to plug and play and then build your other 5 around the non-chalk?
The thing I love about this question is that it has a really easy answer, and that is don't know yet. I'm going to wait and look at the GPP score. So some context here. You're 100% right. Rory is head and shoulders above everybody else. The second best expected strokes gain projection is 1.13. Rory's at 2.07 this week. Rory's at 16% to win, 40% for a top 5 finish, 54% for a top 10, 89% to make the cut. So this past week, let's use Tony Finau and compare him to Rory. Last week, we had Finau's top 5 odds at 18%. He had a 23% chance to miss the cut. This week, Rory, 40% for a top 5, so more than double where Finau was. Only an 11% chance to miss the cut, about half the chances that Finau had to miss. So he's a much better best play in the field than Finau was last week. We'll see what ownership looks like. Basically, if Rory's under 40% owned, I think he's going to look fairly good in the GPP score. If he's 30% or less, he's going to look like one of the best plays on the slate. If everyone views him as, head and shoulders above the rest like we do, and he becomes 50 to 60%, then I'll say, look, he's less likely to make a top 5, to have a top 5 finish. 11% miscut is a really low probability, but it's not nothing. And if you get that like 10% outcome of a 50% owned player missing the cut, you're getting so much leverage. So it's just going to depend on exactly what his ownership comes in at. And it's, I think another part of that too is like, there are guys in the $9,000 range who project really well. Benny On, Minwoo Lee, JT Poston, Corey Connors, Keith Mitchell. What's the ownership of those guys like? Because if those guys are low owned, if any of them slip through the cracks, it's like that's going to be the most important player to me, not necessarily Rory. Whereas maybe the field loads up on those guys, Rory ends up slipping through the cracks, and then it's just an easy decision to go studs and duds instead of the more popular balance build.
So it's fun. This is all leading into a lot of things that I want to talk about. First of all, Minwoo Lee was my first click. He is. This should be right up his alley. And everybody, I'm sure the argument from others is going to be, well, you don't have to hit driver that much. Well, guess what? It's a lot easier to hit a 4-iron in the dead center of the fairway, 250 yards, than it is a 3-wood even, or whatever that club may be. I love that you brought up his name already. But have you noticed the big difference in DraftKings pricing now?
Yeah.
Of the ability to play one or two guys all the way down in the $5,000 range. McIntyre's 6,500.
Yeah. So
you're getting a huge upside player for very cheap, allowing you to fit guys like Minwoo Lee and McIlroy in the same lineup. Is Thomas Dietrich's drop in DraftKings price the biggest of all time?
Where's he at this week?
67 or 6,900?
Seriously?
Yeah.
Oh my God. Yeah. 6,900. Oh my God. Yeah. I think that has to be. He was in the 9,000s last week, and this isn't even a loaded
I think he was like 10-3 or something.
That's crazy. Wow. I haven't been able to completely run through it. I think Doug Gim at 7,000, he strikes me as maybe the most underpriced player on the entire slate. But yeah, Gim, McIntyre, they project really, really well for their price. It's going to be really interesting to see what ownership looks like this week. I will have it run later this afternoon, maybe this evening for our first run. I had to do a lot more editing than usual to the baseline projections. Lots of guys in this field, just like last week, that we just didn't have enough shot link data on, so I had to kind of mess with their source game profile. So running a little bit behind on the ownership as a result, but we will have that up soon. And the nice thing with the GPP scores is I don't feel like it's that necessary to come up with strong DFS takes this early in the week, because GPP scores have just been so successful. I just want to wait for those.
Yeah. I get it. I just think it's crazy the drop in these prices it's not like you're going from non-elevated to elevated events. You're not, the field is definitely stronger. Don't get me wrong, but it's not, it's just crazy the price drops of guys that have played really, really good. Eric Van Rooyen is another one. Like, how are you going to drop him all the way down to 7,400? You're just asking for, so if I'm going to have to wait for your ownership stuff to see if I'm going to play these guys, but I just think that their prices, I don't understand how they do that. So
I'm glad you mentioned Minwoo Lee, by the way, because let's talk about Course Fit for a second. This is another week where driving distance is hugely impactful. It's not the same 197% boost that we had last week in the Mexico Open, but 73% more predictive than usual is distance this week, 13% more than usual for driving accuracy, 18% on around the green, 6% on putting. So lots really predictive. The only category that's less predictive than usual this week is approach play, negative 19%. I think there are a couple things driving that. Number one is whenever driving is this predictive, approach play is going to get a hit just because it becomes that much more about putting yourself in good position off the tee than that second shot, right? When everyone's driving it to the same spot, that's when approach play can really jump up in signal. We don't have that this week. I think the second aspect is this is a difficult golf course. There's a lot of water, so somebody can be a very good iron player, but if they make 2 bad swings and those 2 bad swings are just the miss that you can't make, then it sinks your week from an approach standpoint. So it adds a little bit extra volatility to the approach game, whereas every other aspect of the game really seems to be magnified by PGA National. Yet another reason why I think this course is just fantastic.
It's one of my favorites. They play all year. I love it. We talk about it a lot, but there's a lot more high leverage golf shots at this place than there are most. So, you've got to take that into account. There's just certain shots that mean more than other shots. I hate to say that. Everybody doesn't think that way, but that's just the way it is.
We have Min Woo as the second longest in this field, only behind Rory. His one weakness is approach play. It is a big weakness, by the way. His approach play we have as the worst in the field among anybody over, let's see, $5,800. That's how bad his approach play is. But second longest, he's actually accurate off the tee. Like we have him at 0.08 strokes gained per round with driving accuracy. He wasn't accurate in the past. That was a major issue. He has gained strokes off the tee every event except for one since last April at the RBC Heritage. You can't consistently gain that many strokes without being accurate off the tee. Yes, he's doing it primarily through distance, but it's one of the reasons why our strokes gained accuracy number is so helpful. It's because it actually can separate and isolate the two aspects, whereas you're just looking at percentage of fairways hit. He's never going to look good because he's hitting the ball so damn far that it's that much harder to hit fairways. And then we know he's elite both on and around the greens. So this is a course fit model pretty much perfectly suited to Min Woo Lee. Lots of guys in this range, by the way. I think Benny On is another one who really stands out in the course fit model. So definitely some course fit specialists this week if we want to just like fully take that route in our DFS play and our betting, or even in our one and done selection.
Yeah. I just think that this place challenges you so much, and the better you are off the tee, the easier your approach is, period. Right. So the further if you can hit those high leverage tee shots up there to a wedge, there's going to be so many guys that are laying back that are hitting 7 and 8 iron. Then all of a sudden, even if your approach play is bad, you're hitting so much shorter of a club. Your bad is still going to be better than their good, if that makes sense.
Yeah, 100%. I mentioned that we were going to talk a little bit more about Robert McIntyre. He's the only outright that I have so far, 110 to 1 on Bet365. I'm absolutely taking the each way option there. If you can do that, if you don't have Bet365, you can do it on Bet Rivers. I think he's 100 to 1 there. But honestly, whatever the best number is, whatever the best type of wager you can make on Robert McIntyre, I recommend doing so. We have his fair odds at 49 to 1 this week, not the 100 or 110 to 1. Just enormous value. And I want to talk a little bit about why that is. Number one is that, look, he's actually a pretty good player. His strokes gain profile looks like this. He's gaining 0.2 per round through driving distance, 0.15 accuracy off the tee, quarter of a stroke with his iron play, and a little over a tenth of a stroke around the green, losing about a tenth of a stroke putting. So he's a quality player all around. But the key factor is he's one of the most volatile players on tour from an event to event standpoint. So like last week, I think he was 7th in our top 5 odds or something like that, even though he was around 20th in our expected strokes gained projection. He just has access to a ceiling that very few players of his caliber have because of how volatile he is.
Well, especially somebody that's been struggling so much with the putter, right? I mean, that's been his issue. So, like, if you're going to talk about a world-class player that you want to catch, when he turns it around and gets it going, like, he's a great example.
Yeah, and at the Sony, he gained 0.86 per round with the putter. This past week, he gained 0.04 per round with the putter. The 3 events in between, he lost 2.7, 7.3, one of the worst putting exhibitions we've ever seen, and then 1.8 at the Phoenix Open. So I think people looked at those 3 events where he was just so incredibly bad with the putter, and they said, all right, there's no way I'm using him for the Mexico Open. We'll see what happens this week. I do think he'll end up being pretty popular, but from a pricing standpoint, DraftKings certainly didn't raise the price. And I just think we had every reason to believe that putting could reverse fortune. For one thing, just because it's putting, but also because we know that this guy is one of the most volatile guys in and of himself. So when you have one of the most volatile players struggling in the most volatile part of the game, of course it has a chance to rebound. Every other aspect of his game continued to look pretty solid. So I'm definitely going to be pretty much all aboard the McIntyre train again this week.
Yeah, and I'm pretty positive that it's going to be all Bermuda wall to wall. I don't think they ever overseed down there. I'm not positive, but I don't think. But I think also the change of grass type for somebody like him could really help.
It did last week, seemingly.
Yeah. So you're going to go from West Coast to East Coast, and everything's going to be a little bit different. And then going to Bermuda. Some people Bermuda is just easier to read. No matter what anybody says, it's just you can look at the grain and it doesn't lie, so it's just a different – some people just are better on it. All the surfaces on the PGA Tour are so good. Everybody's like, oh, there's nothing better than bent grass. Well, I'm going to tell you that some of those Bermuda surfaces are every bit as good. Yeah.
Yeah, some are lightning fast and so smooth. It also helps, by the way, I think when greens aren't just fast, but they're firm, especially when Bermuda greens are firm, it just makes them that much smoother.
Yeah, and like I said, all it does is help you show which way, grain mostly goes which way water goes. Everybody else thinks something different. Nobody understands. It's going to go A, which way water flows, and B, which way it's mowed. Where the best is when you get this old guy, he's like, oh, no, it follows the sun. Come on, it's not 1910. Our grass doesn't follow the sun. But I just think it helps. I mean, you almost never see grain grow uphill. So I think some of these guys are like, all right, I'm going to check the grain first, and then we'll read the putt from there.
Yeah. It's interesting. I'm not someone who really believes a ton in splits. We've had this conversation before we might as well rehash it. My concern when looking at like grass type splits is you never know why a player has the splits that they do. So for example, a player could have really bad Bermuda splits, not because they don't do well in Bermuda, but because they just happen to have a really bad alignment issue with their putting during the Florida swing. And now because of that alignment issue, which the next year is fixed, their Bermuda splits are going to look terrible for the next 5 years. And nothing to do with Bermuda. It just was the timing. And that comes with the fact that the PGA Tour doesn't bounce from one grass type to the next from week to week. They often go through stretches of, here we're in the Florida swings, so we're going to play a lot of Bermuda. Then we go, we were just in California, so we had a lot of Poa annua, that sort of thing. So I'm not somebody who likes to use them very much. But if you think that they are a part of your process and want really good splits data, we have that at FTN. Josh does a fantastic job with his splits tool. You can get Paspalum splits, you can get Bermuda splits, whatever the case, long course, short course, difficult course, windy, fairway penalty low, things of that nature. Any type of split that you can think of, he's got it on that tool. So make sure you check that out if you haven't already. And I mentioned that for McIntyre in large part because his Paspalum split was pretty good. It's what they played on last week. Bad Bermuda splits for McIntyre. Does that give you any pause? It doesn't for me, but I'm curious your thoughts there.
No, I don't. I mean, when he's putting it so bad on everything else, like it's not going to change anything. Like the volatility is still going to be there. It's just another option of something that can help get you on track more than hurt you. And most of mine is going to be. So, I mean, it's just the fact of golf. Mm-hmm. Your club goes through the ground different when you hit an iron shot or a wedge shot off of Bermuda fairway than it does a bent grass fairway, than it does a Paspalum fairway, than it does a Poa annua fairway. Like it's all different. That being said, These guys are the best in the world. They have a track man in every place. They know exactly how far they're hitting their golf ball. It's not like they're just going out there eyeballing it. I do believe there are certain players in the world that are just more comfortable on certain types of grass. I don't think that that's a universal thing. I don't think that that's everybody. I just think that is just the way it is. There's just maybe no explanation. Like, I know I'm more comfortable in Bermuda than I am bent grass.
Yeah.
That
I 100% agree with. I would say I'm definitely more comfortable on bent than any other kind of surface. But I think if you and I were playing on the PGA Tour, I think it's very likely that our splits data wouldn't show that, just because there's so much randomness in the samples. And like I said, your splits are going to be so tied to just how well you're aligning yourself and how well you're putting in that month stretch, rather than how comfortable you are on the surface. So I agree that players have comfort levels on different surfaces, and they have some that they think they're going to be best at, but it's not necessarily going to show up in the data.
No, I mean, you can even go back to our other conversation of high leverage shots. Which golf course do you hit your high leverage shots the best? Mm-hmm. And then your splits are going to be better there, no matter what kind of surface it's on. So I just think it's just something that I think about a little bit with certain people. And it's usually more likely if they're struggling with a facet of the game like putting. I just think it gives the mind something else to think about to maybe help correct it.
One and done. We've got to get a win here soon. Is McIntyre in the conversation, or do you want to start elsewhere?
I don't think. I think the field is too strong for McIntyre to be in the conversation. I would start with Minwoo Lee before I would start with McIntyre. We're kind of the thing with Minwoo Lee is, do we want to wait and take a chance with him someplace like the Players or with a little bit bigger purse, elevate event, because I think he has that elite talent. But like you said, it comes to a point where we just need to win a golf tournament.
Yeah, I love Minwoo Lee here. I said to you ahead of time that I think we're going to have the same guy. I almost think we don't even need to talk about anyone else. It sounds like Minwoo's just our guy this week.
I hope he's going to be. I mean, the only other guy that I kind of hinted around in my mind was Eric Cole, just because his past, he played good here. He hasn't shown much of a slump. And I don't think we would regret using him here. Later on down the road, he's not a guy we would go back and say, I wish we still had him available, like we might do with Minwoo Lee. That being said, we've kind of aligned ourselves with taking live guys at the majors. So, the Players, we're still going to have a Scheffler or somebody like that available. Mm-hmm. If we were doing this 3 years ago, what are the chances our first words wouldn't have been Daniel Berger?
Yeah, it's true. Berger not projecting that well for us this week, in part because his short game has been downright abysmal since returning. His ball striking, I think, has been a pleasant surprise, but until he can show any sign of life with that short game, I just kind of want no part of him. The guy that I would go to next after Minwoo Lee is actually Sepp Straka, among the highest win odds behind Rory, of course. Part of that is because his event-to-event standard deviation is so incredibly high. Very similar argument to Robert McIntyre. It's not like he has the same, expected strokes gain projection as the Minwoo Lee, Benny on, Connors, Mitchell, that range of player. But he has the win equity, so I wouldn't have a problem going there. And the fact that he won here previously doesn't seem to be boosting his popularity. It doesn't seem to be affecting his odds in the betting market. So I would have some interest in Straka. Curious your thoughts there.
I would think on before Straka personally. Mm-hmm. I get it, especially the fact that he's had success here. And he's another guy that seems like he didn't win and then kind of fall off the charts and have no chance. Speaking of, and just to go back to Berger for a second, he was one of those guys like that comes to mind on Bermuda greens. And even Bermuda fairways that always seem to have a little bit more success on Bermuda than everything else. I don't even know if that's true on as far as data goes. I'm just going by strictly what I've seen and when he's won mm-hmm. and been in contention. So can you beat since he's been so bad around the greens, we're getting this grass type change. Is there a chance that he could be one of the ones that benefits the most from that?
Fair point. So let's do this. It sounds like Min Woo is first for both of us. I think my second choice would be Straka. It sounds like yours would be Ben On.
I would probably lean to On. Secondly, I think he fits the bill just like Straka. I just think from a high leverage golf shot, I think I'd rather have On hitting it than Straka. That's literally my only argument to it.
I think that's a fair point. I'd also throw Poston in there as a possible choice for anyone out there. I think you and I have already used him, so obviously we can't. But any listeners who are looking for some potential options up there, I think Poston is another good one. I think there's a chance that all of Poston, Minwoo, and Ben On are really popular. So I think one of the reasons why I brought up the Straka name is just like, look, if we don't want a 5 to 10% guy, if we want a 1% guy, I think Straka could potentially be that.
Yeah, and I see a lot of people giving Russell Henley a lot of love too. And I think him and Poston are kind of the same player to me. I don't know if that's fair or not, but that's just the way that I view them.
Yeah.
That range is really close. I think the reason I went to Minwoo Lee is I just think he's got a better chance of winning.
Yeah, I agree. I put Minwoo in there for now. We can of course change it later in the week, but I think we're pretty much set on that unless we think he's going to be like 15 to 20% owned. Any closing thoughts before we head out of here?
No, I think this will be a really fun weekend. I'm pretty excited about obviously the Anthony Kim return and then the PGA Tour playing a great golf course with a good field too. I think that's really big is that we actually have some really, really good players here. Some interesting players. I mean, we just went through the whole episode without talking about Matt Fitzpatrick. I mean, just really good players that can have proven they could win. So that helps the PGA Tour this week. I guess I'm going to wait to build lineups until I see all your info though, because I'm going to quit guessing if you're just going to keep winning.
Yeah, let's hope that the success continues there. By the way, one of the things I won last week was a ticket to a $3,333 contest for the Players Championship, $500,000 up top in that contest. So maybe that week we'll have to come up with some type of giveaway if I can hit big in that one. We'll think of some fun things to do there. But thanks everybody for tuning in. We will catch you next time.